My name is Rebecca Cole. I walked into our 20-year high school reunion wearing a plain navy dress, and within 5 minutes I was reminded that in their eyes, I had never amounted to anything. The valet barely glanced at me. I murmured a thank you, tucked my clutch under my arm, and stepped through the grand double doors of Aspen Grove Resort. The chandelier above the lobby glimmered like a chandelier in Versailles, just gaudy enough to remind you didn't belong. Everyone was already inside. I could hear the hum of laughter, the swell of applause, and the clink of wine glasses even before the concierge offered me a name tag. It read, Rebecca Cole in generic serif font, no title, no distinction, no weight. Chloe's touch, no doubt. I still wore the ring from West Point under my sleeve. But no one saw it. That's exactly how I planned it. The main ballroom opened like a theater stage, long tables dressed in ivory linens, floral arrangements centered with ridiculous crystals, a 6-tier cake glittering on a pedestal. At the front stood a large screen playing a slideshow of memories. Prom Debate Club cheerleaders' class trip to D.C. Chloe was in half of them. I was in maybe 3. Chloe Cole, my younger sister, was already on stage when I entered. She wore a red sheath dress that practically screamed power, and her voice poured through the microphone with effortless charisma. And after 15 years at the Department of Justice, I'm proud to say I've recently been appointed Deputy Director for Western Cyber Oversight, she said, tossing her hair with a laugh. But I'll never forget where it started, right here at Jefferson High. And of course, I have to thank my sister who is with us tonight for always being uniquely herself. The crowd chuckled, unsure if it was a compliment. I didn't flinch. That was Chloe's talent weaponizing praise. I found my name at a far-off table, table 14 near the buffet trays and close to the exit. The names at the front tables were embossed in gold: Dr. Hartman, CEO, Wang, Senator Gil, Chloe Cole. I sat down at mine, no centerpiece, half-eaten shrimp cocktail on a shared plate. From across the room, Jason Hart spotted me. He hadn't changed much. Still tall, still smug. He made his way over, drink in hand, suit perfect, and leaned in with a smirk that hadn't matured. Becca, he said smoothly, still stationed in the desert? Or are you pushing paper in Kansas? Now I smiled tightly. Nice to see you too, Jason. He laughed. Come on, I'm joking. But seriously, didn't you study pre-law? What happened? Before I could answer, a woman in pearls leaned toward another guest and whispered loud enough for me to hear. Didn't she drop out of law school? Shame. So much potential. Melissa Jung caught my eye from 3 tables away. She gave a faint smile. I returned it, unsure if it meant pity or solidarity. Probably both. The dinner crowd thickened. Waiters moved like clockwork, serving prime rib and scalloped potatoes. Chloe stopped by all theatrical hugs and sparkling teeth. Oh, Becca, she said. Glad you could make it. I almost didn't recognize you in that navy. Vintage, it's just a dress, I said. Well, you always were practical. She tilted her head. You know we really should talk sometime. You've got so many stories, I'm sure. Only the quiet ones, I replied. Jason returned now, accompanied by 2 other classmates. One of them, a tanned woman in a pale blue suit, squinted at me. Wait, were you in the army? That's right. I remember you left after sophomore year to enlist or something. A man behind her barked a laugh. Wait, you were in the army. So what? Like a clerk or a mess hall sergeant. Several heads turned. Some laughed. Jason looked amused. Chloe didn't say anything. I took a sip of water. The glass trembled slightly in my hand, but I held it steady. The air felt suddenly heavier, like gravity had shifted inside the room. But I didn't let it pull me down. I stood up without a word, adjusted the sleeve that hid my West Point ring, and looked at each of them with a calm I'd earned over 2 decades in war rooms and underground bunkers. I smiled faintly, quietly, replied, something like that, then walked to the balcony where my encrypted phone pinged silently. They saw a nobody in a discount dress, but I had once briefed NATO in that same dress just under a military coat they never knew existed. The wind outside curled around the edges of the balcony like it was trying to eavesdrop. I stayed out there a while, my back straight, eyes on the dark treetops that swayed above the golf course. The resort lights bled gold into the grass, but up here where no one cared to stand, it was quiet. That kind of quiet was rare in my world. Inside, the clamor of success stories swelled again. Laughter, toasts. Another slideshow frame sliding into view. Chloe with the debate team. Chloe in front of the White House. Chloe at Harvard. The door behind me opened with a hiss. Jason. There you are, he said already halfway through his next scotch. You always did like standing on the edge of things. I didn't answer. He leaned against the railing too close. You know, he started voice casual. You really used to have a future. Valedictorian track. Debate team prodigy. Harvard law practically begging. And then poof army. He laughed. Still can't wrap my head around that. His laugh hadn't changed. Same clipped arrogance. Same need to feel one step ahead. It pulled me back to the last time we stood this close senior year, the dorm hallway still smelling like burnt coffee and laundry soap. I had told him I'd accepted West Point. You're kidding, he had said, his jaw tightening. The military. You're throwing this away? It's not throwing away, I'd replied. It's choosing something bigger. Yeah, he snapped, bigger than me. And then he walked out. No goodbye. No call. Just vanished. Now, 20 years later, here he was, again still resenting a choice that had nothing to do with him. I didn't disappear, Jason. I said, my voice calm. I just stopped explaining myself. He scoffed. You always did like cryptic answers. I turned to go, but he caught my arm gently, just enough to make me stop. You could have been someone, Rebecca. I looked at him. I am someone. Just not someone you'd recognize. Before he could answer, the door swung open again. Chloe, Jason, she called, that faux breezy tone she used when she wanted to be overheard. They're asking for the golden trio picture. Come on, for old time's sake. Her eyes flicked to me and her smile widened. Oh, Becca, didn't know you were still here. Thought you might have ducked out early like usual. Jason dropped his hand from my arm. Chloe approached, looping her arm around his like it had always belonged there. Anyway, she continued, brushing a non-existent speck off Jason's jacket. Everyone's dying to know what our class's only DOJ appointee and its most successful real estate developer have been up to. I told them you two are still deciding who wins the power couple crown. She laughed, but there was something pointed in her glance at me. Jason chuckled awkwardly, clearly unsure whether this was flirtation or performance. Chloe's eyes sparkled. And Rebecca, what are you up to these days? Still, somewhere hot. I'm in transition, I said simply. Oh, she said with mock concern, not out of work, I hope. I manage fine, I replied, just not from behind podiums. She tilted her head. Always so mysterious. Her smile tightened. But I guess not everyone likes the spotlight. She turned, then tugging Jason back inside her heels, clicking with satisfaction. I stayed there a moment longer, letting the wind thread through my fingers. The bar lights from inside painted slivers of gold across the floorboards. I wasn't angry. I'd spent too many years learning how to feel everything and show nothing. Eventually, I re-entered the ballroom. The room had shifted into after-dinner mingling, smaller clusters, now more drinks, looser tongues. Melissa was at the edge of a group near the bar, nursing a glass of wine and watching. I joined her. That was painful, she murmured. I smiled faintly. Which part? All of it, she replied, then added, You look better than them all, by the way. I doubt they'd agree. Doesn't matter. Truth doesn't need a majority vote. I appreciated her. She didn't pretend to know everything, didn't rush to fill silence. She simply observed. Across the room, Chloe leaned in close to Jason, whispering something that made him laugh. When she caught me watching, she didn't look away. She just smiled. Didn't she used to follow you around like a shadow? Melissa asked. She learned to outshine me, instead, I said. Before she could respond, a gentle hand touched my shoulder. I turned. Mr. Walters. He looked older. Grayer hair, thinner frame, but the eyes were just as sharp as they were when he taught AP history. He wore a navy blazer, khakis, and that same crooked half smile that used to precede a surprise pop quiz. Ms. Cole, he said warmly. I was hoping you'd be here. I heard about your military service. I nodded. Thank you, Mr. Walters. You wrote a paper on asymmetric warfare in my class, he said. I still remember it. Brilliant work. I blinked. That paper had been a late-night act of defiance written after a phone call with Jason had left me in tears. I remember, I said softly. He leaned in slightly, voice lower. Tell me, did you ever serve in Ghost Viper? I've heard things. They thought I disappeared into obscurity. In truth, I disappeared into national silence. I locked the hotel room door behind me and exhaled slowly, letting the buzz of the reunion fade into a faint thrum beneath the thick walls. The room itself was unassuming faux crystal lamps, cream-colored carpet, a folded bathrobe on the bed. It looked like it could belong to any guest. That was the point. I slipped off my heels, crossed the room, and reached under the hanging navy dress bag. Beneath it, nestled inside a black hard-shell case with no markings, was the reason I still woke up every day with purpose. I flicked open the latches. The interior glowed faint blue. A fingerprint scan, retinal scan, voice confirmation. Cole, Rebecca. Clearance Echo 5. A soft chime, then the screen lit up secure comms online. A flurry of data populated the display. Threat indicators. Unresolved protocols. Project Merlin's status active breach containment. I skimmed the latest assessment. 4 red zones. 2 possible internal actors. 1 breach point matching the blueprint I'd flagged 6 weeks ago. Still no resolution. A message flashed. Incoming call Ellison J2 Cyber Command. I tapped the screen. His face appeared square-jawed, midnight stubble eyes like he hadn't slept in 2 days. Ma'am, he said, not bothering with small talk. I've just come out of a debrief. Situation's changed. They want your eyes on the Merlin intercepts ASAP. I didn't blink. Joint Chiefs unofficially. Officially, it's an advisory consult. But let's not pretend this isn't critical. We've got a NATO partner compromised and internal chatter linking the breach to Phoenix protocol files. A pause. Then his voice softened slightly. Rebecca, they need you back in DC by Monday. I stared at the blinking map overlay. 4 red zones, yes. But there was a 5th, just starting to pulse. I can't leave yet, I said quietly. Understood. But if this escalates, it will. Hori said, cutting him off. It's already in motion. He looked at me like he wanted to argue, but didn't. You've got 48, he said. After that, we extract whether you're ready or not. I'm sending intel briefs to your secure cloud. The screen flickered as the call ended. For a moment, I just sat there, the glow of the case humming beside me. The hum had become a comfort. Not because it was peaceful, but because it meant I was still needed. Still in the fight. A chime. New secure message Pentagon. Forward liaison. Subject, urgent. Standing authority update line. Direct extraction possible if urgent. You're the fulcrum. I closed the message. I already knew what it meant. If Merlin collapsed and the intel leak spread to civilian grids, it wouldn't matter whether I was dancing in a ball gown or kneeling in a war room. I would be pulled out. The fulcrum wasn't a title. It was a tether. I stood stretched, then walked to the window. Outside, the lights of Aspen Grove still sparkled like a painting too polished to be real. I could hear music again. Soft jazz now, followed by a DJ's voice booming something about a class slideshow. 20 years ago, I'd sat in that auditorium with Jason, Chloe, and Melissa listening to our valedictorian speak about legacy. I remember clapping politely, even smiling for the yearbook photo. I never imagined my legacy would be silence. 15 years ago, Ghost Viper deployed on a mission so sensitive we burned every scrap of planning material afterward. We succeeded, but at a cost. 3 agents never came home. Their names didn't make the news. I gave the final go order on that op. I was the youngest to do so. No medal, no citation, just a single line in an encrypted server operation completed. No attribution. Debrief sealed indefinitely. I carried those silences like medals no one could pin. Now they needed me again. I turned from the window and began to pack. Not much, just the Case 2 devices and a dress uniform folded beneath a false bottom panel in my suitcase. My fingers lingered on the coat sleeve where a single silver star rested just above the cuff. I didn't plan to wear it yet. Not until I was ready. I have one thing left to settle before I leave. 48 hours. Outside music from the reunion resumes. I look out and murmur, one last night in the shadows. I wore no medals, but I carried more scars than anyone in that ballroom. The ceiling of the grand ballroom shimmered with thousands of glass fragments casting golden specks over polished tables and champagne flutes. The room buzzed with rehearsed nostalgia and curated success, like everyone was performing a role they had waited 20 years to play. The class of 2003 had aged into its power suits and practiced laughter. I sat near the rear again, table 14, flanked by two former varsity swimmers now in venture capital, and a woman who ran a skincare empire out of Beverly Hills. None of them remembered my name. They smiled politely, then turned back to each other. I didn't mind. It was safer this way. The band hushed. The MC, a balding man with a booming voice who had once been the prom DJ, stepped to the microphone. And now he beamed our highlight of the evening, the 2003 Most Distinguished Alumna Award. The votes were unanimous this year. She's smart, accomplished, and a rising star in federal service. Please welcome Deputy Director Chloe Cole. The applause was thunderous. Chloe ascended the stage like it was built for her. Her scarlet dress caught the spotlight perfectly. She took the mic with both hands, pausing long enough for the room to still. She didn't look at me, but her voice reached through every corner. Thank you all. I'm honored and a little stunned. I mean, I'm just doing my job. But I guess over time we see who rises, who leads, and who simply watches from the wings. Laughter. Measured, polite. She continued. I want to thank my mentors, my team at the DOJ, and, of course, my high school teachers, especially those who encouraged ambition over conformity. They taught me that serving is admirable, but leading. That's where real change happens. Another ripple of applause. She smiled as if she'd just solved a riddle, then added, I think we all know someone who chose to fade into the background. And that's okay. Not everyone wants or can handle the light. I didn't move. My face didn't flicker. But I saw Melissa look at me from across the room. Not with pity, with something sharper. Disbelief. Jason, a few tables up, stood with his wine glass raised. To Chloe he declared, Our own Iron Lady. Proof that leading from the front beats hiding in the shadows, unless you're peeling potatoes on a base in Nebraska. That got a laugh. Even from people who didn't understand the reference. They just followed the rhythm. Chloe smiled modestly as though the toast embarrassed her. Melissa didn't clap. I looked at her again. She was biting her lip. The MC returned. Let's hear it for Chloe. And hey, any generals in the room tonight? No, guess not. Well, maybe next reunion. Huh? Laughter again. I rose quietly. No one noticed. I slipped between tables, my heels silent on the carpet. Jason called out after me. Hey, Rebecca, wait. I didn't mean I kept walking. There was nothing left for me to hear. The hallway was cooler, dimmer, far from the lights and curated memories. I moved past framed photos of our senior year homecoming theater plays, awards nights, and into the vestibule, where the air held less expectation. Outside, the night wrapped around me like armor. The sky above Aspen Grove was velvet black, punctuated by stars I hadn't seen for days. I took a breath. Then my encrypted phone buzzed in my clutch. Extraction cleared. Helipad ETA 6 minutes. They said my life had amounted to nothing. But then the sky began to shake. I stood alone near the edge of the lawn, past the clusters of fairy lights and string quartets, past the perimeter, where the photographers had stopped shooting, and the voices had begun to soften into polite, well-oiled networking. Beyond the trellises, the night was quieter, cooler. My heels pressed gently into the damp grass, and I tilted my head upward to watch the stars. For a moment, they reminded me of the sand-colored nights overseas, of field maps lit by filtered moonlight, of a silence that meant danger, not dismissal. Behind me, the echoes of the reunion still clung to the air. Chloe's acceptance speech. Jason's wine-soaked joke, the MC's final laugh. In their eyes, I had exited the story already. Unimportant. Forgotten. I once told Melissa years ago in passing, I don't need them to clap. I just need them to see. I hadn't meant for that moment to arrive this way. The wind shifted. A low rumble started, soft at first, barely distinguishable from the ambient hum of generators and distant traffic. But it grew. Waiters paused mid-step. Someone looked up. A few guests glanced around, puzzled. Then the lights on the grass flickered, white dots replaced by harsh, concentrated beams from above. A sound cracked through the air like thunder splitting sideways. People gasped, trays dropped, glass shattered, napkins flew. From the northern tree line, a dark form emerged, angular, exact. A military helicopter, matte black, slicing the sky with precision. Its rotors thundered as it hovered above the lawn lights blazing into the crowd. Screams of confusion, phones out. Someone yelled, "What's happening?" A mother pulled her child close. Jason shielded his eyes. Chloe's champagne flute tilted, spilling gold down her dress. The helicopter began to descend, rotors kicking up a cyclone of leaves and petals. Guests stumbled back as hair and ties whipped in every direction. The string quartet stopped playing. Cameras flashed, not out of joy now, but confusion, fear. Then it landed. The door opened. Colonel Marcus Ellison stepped out in full dress uniform, ribbons gleaming under the floodlight. His boots crunched the gravel path as he crossed the lawn, head-high pace, unhurried. He didn't glance at the crowd. His eyes were locked on one thing. Me. I didn't move. I stood straight, arms at my sides, the wind pulling slightly at my navy dress. For the first time that night, I didn't feel underdressed. I felt exactly as I needed to be. Ellison stopped 3 feet away, squared his shoulders, and saluted, crisp, deliberate, impeccable. Then he spoke, a voice projected over the stunned silence. "Lieutenant General Cole. Ma'am, the Pentagon requires your presence. Immediate briefing." The words hit the air like a detonation. Someone gasped. Another dropped a phone. A wine glass shattered. I heard Jason's voice behind me, barely above a whisper. "No." "What?" Chloe stumbled back a step, her mouth frozen open, her eyes wide and glassy. Melissa was the first to move. She stepped forward, breath caught, then whispered just loud enough to carry. "Oh, my God." "Rebecca." They all froze as Ellison said the words. "Lieutenant General Cole." I had never spoken my title aloud in public, but now it roared through the silence like thunder. The last vibrations of the helicopter blades rumbled through the earth like an aftershock. The air had gone still again, but not silent. This was the quiet of stunned disbelief, of neurons failing to catch up to what eyes had just seen. Colonel Ellison handed me the folder, black embossed, sealed. His voice dropped just enough for only me to hear. "Target movement confirmed 2 hours ago. Pentagon wants eyes on intercept recommendations. Merlin's window is narrowing." I nodded once. "Anyone dead?" "Not yet, but that won't hold." From behind him, I heard Chloe's voice crack through the frozen silence. Wait. Did he just say?" General, all eyes shifted to her. She stood barefoot now, having lost a heel in the chaos, clutching her clutch like a lifeline. Her dress sparkled beneath the floodlight, but her face was losing its sheen fast. "Rebecca," she repeated, voice rising. "You're in the military. But I thought you thought I was peeling potatoes in Nebraska," I said calmly. Jason stumbled forward, still gripping his wineglass like it might anchor him. I didn't know," he said. General, I had no idea. I thought you'd dropped out. Law school, West Point. I didn't even—" He trailed off as the cameras started flashing. Melissa stepped beside me, her hands trembling. "I don't understand how you hid this." "I wasn't hiding," I said. "I was serving." Somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping. Just a few hands, then more. A ripple of confused, unsure applause rose and faded like an orchestra missing half its instruments. But it was enough. I took a step toward the center of the lawn, where voices had started to rise in whispers, questions, fragments of disbelief. I didn't speak loudly. I didn't have to. "Some people wear uniforms loudly," I said. "Others wear them quietly. That doesn't make us any less visible. It just means we serve without needing to be seen." Ellison gave a nod toward the helo. "Ma'am, ETA 1 minute. I turned to Melissa. Her eyes shone now not with pity or confusion, but with awe. "You really are the fulcrum," she whispered. I smiled faintly. Sometimes silence is a blade. Jason tried again. "Becca, please, can we talk? I was wrong. I didn't see you." "That's the thing," I replied without turning. "You never tried to." Chloe stood off to the side, arms crossed, chest heaving. Her expression had frozen, not in embarrassment, but calculation. As the crowd shifted, phones raised, and whispers became captions, she quietly pulled out her own. One quick swipe. She opened her podcast app. Tapped record. This is Chloe Cole, she began in a low, controlled voice. Live from Aspen Grove, where some very interesting truths are unfolding. Behind me, the rotors kicked up again. Ellison guided me to the helo, and the ground fell away beneath my feet as I climbed aboard. Flashbulbs snapped, faces blurred beneath the growing cloud of wind and debris. Some still clapped, some stood frozen, some pulled out their phones. As we lifted off, I caught one last glimpse through the window. Chloe eyes burning, still recording. By the time my boots touched Pentagon ground, the internet had lit up. And Chloe's voice was already echoing across my inbox. The secure door sealed shut behind me with a pressurized hiss. Inside the skiff, the silence was dense, thicker than noise. The digital haze of Aspen Grove had been replaced by concrete walls, muted lighting, and the hum of threat matrices crawling across classified screens. I shed the last fragments of reunion perfume at the threshold. Here, it was sweat data and urgency. Colonel Ellison briefed me while walking briskly past rows of terminals. I was already scanning the contents of the secure tablet he'd handed over, logs from a breach surge near a Baltic server farm, half-matched encryption markers, suspected disinformation clusters tagged Merlin adjacent. "General Monroe's waiting," he said. I didn't pause. We turned into the operations suite. At the end of the room stood Monroe, imposing unreadable chest adorned with a full career's weight in ribbons. "Cole," he said, voice taut. "I've seen the chatter, both from inside the wire and outside. You still good? I'm focused, sir." "Good. Because I need your eyes on the disinformation vector. This one's political. And personal." He passed me another dossier. A projection flicked on behind him, maps lighting up in pulses, timelines crossing with hashtags. "Last 48 hours, he said. Merlin's breach patterns correlate with the sudden viral trend involving your name. Civilian networks picked up a podcast that blew your profile wide open." I stiffened. "Chloe, correct. The episode's called My Sister the Myth, released less than 12 hours ago. Already re-uploaded by 24 alt media channels. I didn't need to listen. I knew the cadence of her voice, the precision of her passive aggression. We need to talk about military narcissism she'd once joked years ago over wine. Now she was building a brand around it." Monroe continued. "She accuses you of weaponizing rank for validation, calls your Pentagon presence a narrative move. Claims you ghosted your own family and now return in full uniform to steal the spotlight. And the public?" I asked. Splitty replied, "You've got veterans calling her ungrateful, but influencers are picking it up. TikTok edits, Reddit debates, hashtags trending, hashtag sister in shadows, hashtag real Rebecca, hashtag warrior or PR." I exhaled slowly. "Sir, I'd prefer not to engage. You don't have a choice," he said. "The civilian info ecosystem has become a secondary battlefield. If someone's tying your name to Merlin, it's not just gossip, it's an opportune chaos vector." I nodded. Understood. He looked at me, something unreadable flickering in his expression. "You know who you are. Just don't let them redefine it for you." Back at my desk in the secondary skiff hub, I scanned my secure inbox. There were over 90 media requests. Anderson Cooper, The Atlantic, even a satirical late-night host who wanted me to read mean tweets in uniform. I ignored them all. Below the requests came the other flood. Comments, hate mail, DMs calling me a fraud, accusations that I faked my rank for a public stunt. Some even said I was an actress, not a general. One video looped me stepping into the helicopter. The caption, "Deep State Cosplay." I rubbed my temples. A red alert pinged on my screen. Civilian disinformation sensor flagged Rebecca Cole as active target. Risk level 4-5. Initial vectors traced to pseudo-news outlet Citizen Circuit source uploaded hours after podcast drop. She hadn't just called me out. She'd fed me to the wolves. I stared at the screen. Chloe didn't understand what she'd unleashed. Or maybe she did. A message pinged from my personal line. Melissa Zhang. Voice note 1. 7. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice came through low, fast. "You need to hear this, Rebecca. I just talked to Jason. He told me something about Chloe, something she deleted years ago. I think it's connected to what's happening now. You need to know." I thought silence would shield me. But sometimes silence gives liars all the room they need. The windows of my temporary DC office looked out over the Pentagon's inner courtyard, but the view offered no relief. Everything felt too bright, too sterile. The walls were lined with framed commendations and a clock that ticked with military precision, but time didn't feel linear today. It bent curled around memories I hadn't unpacked in years. Jason sat across from me, his knees bouncing slightly. He was wearing a suit, but his tie was loosened and his expression was frayed. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "I should have said something back then. But honestly, I didn't think it mattered." I watched him carefully. He looked like a man about to confess to something bigger than he could contain. "She came to me right after you enlisted," he said. "Chloe. She said you had asked the school to keep your name off the alumni honors list, that you didn't want the attention." I didn't question it. I tilted my head. "You didn't think it was strange?" He hesitated. I did. But it was Chloe. She was always so certain, so composed. She made it sound like she was protecting your wishes. She even forwarded an email chain to the school board asking for the removal of your name. Said it was for consistency, that since you'd left the Ivy League path it might confuse the narrative. The narrative, I repeated the words, slicing through my teeth like glass. He looked ashamed. I didn't respond to the thread. I didn't stop it. I just let it happen. I stood slowly, walked to the file cabinet behind me, and placed a hand on its cold metal edge. Something inside me wanted to scream, but training teaches you to wait, to observe, to strike with purpose, not impulse. "She erased me," I said softly, "not just from dinner tables or party invites. She erased me from history." Jason looked down. "That's not all." A knock at the door. Melissa stepped in, holding a folder with both hands like it weighed something sacred. "I found it," she said, walking in. "The nomination form. Your Medal of Honor file from 2018. I stared at it. "I thought the board never submitted it." "They didn't," she said. "But not because of bureaucracy." She opened the folder and slid out a printed email, old, grainy, but readable. At the top was Chloe's name, her DOJ address, and her signature at the bottom. Subject: Medal of Honor submission. Lieutenant Jen R. Cole. Note: General Cole has expressed a strong desire for anonymity. Please do not pursue further recognition without direct consent. My jaw tightened. I never wrote that. "I know," Melissa said, "but she had access, and she was your emergency contact at the time." I blinked. The weight of it pressed into my ribs. Melissa added, "She told the nomination committee you'd withdrawn your consent. The board dropped it without ever contacting you." Jason's voice was hollow. "She didn't just remove your name from a list. She removed your name from legacy." I turned away, swallowing a sudden sting in my throat. It wasn't just jealousy or rivalry. Chloe had crafted a version of me so small, so invisible, that even my victories vanished under her approval. A soft vibration buzzed from Jason's phone. He checked it, frowned, then looked up at me. "She's planning something worse," he said. "Chloe's organizing alumni. She's calling it a restoration effort, a vote to block your new nomination from going through. Says it'll protect the integrity of the alumni brand." I met his eyes. "She's rewriting the past," I said. "But I'm still here, and I still remember. Being forgotten is one thing. Being rewritten, that's war." The reunion auditorium smelled faintly of lemon polish and old carpet, the scent of manufactured reverence. Rows of folding chairs had been neatly arranged, adorned with maroon ribbons and tiny gold seals bearing the crest of the class of 2003. On stage, a banner read, "Legacy and Leadership, celebrating 20 years of excellence." I stood at the back, arms crossed, my military blazer buttoned cleanly over a cream blouse. I hadn't been invited. But today wasn't about invitations. It was about presence. On the stage, Chloe adjusted the microphone. Her smile was precise, her movements rehearsed. She wore a tailored ivory suit and pearl earrings. To the untrained eye, she radiated poise. Success, she began, is not about medals or mystique. It's about showing up, day after day. About building something others can trust. Applause rippled through the crowd. Alumni, current students, a smattering of media. Reporters scribbled notes. Camera phones flicked up. She continued. My sister once said she preferred to serve in silence. But silence can be misleading. Silence lets myths grow in the cracks of truth. A murmur rose. Someone near the press section whispered, "Wait isn't her sister, a general." Chloe smiled faintly as if she hadn't heard. Real leadership, she added, doesn't come from titles. It comes from showing up when it matters. Melissa found me near the side aisle and pressed a manila folder into my hand. "It's all in there," she said softly. "DOD acknowledgement, the nomination memo, and that photo." I nodded. As Chloe wrapped up with a line about legacy built on clarity, I stepped forward. Voices hushed. A few gasps. Chairs creaked as heads turned. I walked up the central aisle. My boots echoed sharp against the carpeted wood. The alumni board chair, an elderly man with tired eyes and a silver tie, noticed me. His brow furrowed. "Lieutenant General Cole," he said, voice unsure. I met his gaze. "Requesting 3 minutes at the podium." Chloe had frozen. Someone from the press whispered, "That's her. That's the sister." The chair hesitated, then gave a slight nod. I climbed the steps. Chloe stood to the side, lips tight. I didn't look at her. I faced the crowd. Hundreds of eyes, a mix of awe, confusion, doubt. I didn't speak. Instead, I opened the folder. From inside, I pulled out a single photograph, me in full dress uniform standing at NATO command. I was saluting a silver star gleaming on my shoulder next to General Aubrey Klein the day I'd received the classified commendation no civilian had ever seen. I held the photo up high and steady. The room went utterly silent. I didn't need applause. I just needed 1 second of their attention, earned, not demanded. I lowered the photo slowly. The room remained still, a breath held tight in collective lungs. From the edge of the stage, Melissa gave a small nod. I stepped forward. "My name is Rebecca Cole," I began, voice even unshaken. "Class of 2003, first chair in orchestra, founder of the International Relations Club, voted most likely to be a professor." That one didn't age well. A soft ripple of laughter, tentative. I continued. "I served because I believed in a country that didn't always believe in me. I didn't wear a name badge for approval. I wore one to remind me of purpose." From my folder, I held up a thin packet, copies of operation briefs with redacted code names, letters of commendation, the nomination record Melissa had uncovered. These are parts of a life lived beyond this room. Not glamorous, not loud, but real. I didn't look at Chloe, though I felt her presence like a vibration at the edge of my spine. Instead, I scanned the crowd faces I once knew, students watching from the aisles, reporters hovering near the exits. "I won't name names," I said, voice firm, "because this isn't about anyone else's story. It's about mine. About those who serve quietly, who show up not for attention, but because not showing up would mean someone else might pay the price." I paused, then added, "Some of us protect in silence. That doesn't make our stories invisible." Camera shutters clicked. Someone near the front wiped at their eyes. "I'm not here for praise," I said. "I'm here to remind you that truth is louder than applause and far harder to silence." I turned slightly, letting my eyes land just over the crowd. You can erase names from walls, but not from memory, and certainly not from history. With that, I stepped back from the microphone. No music played, no loud cheers, just something deeper, a reverent hush. I descended the stairs, passing rows of alumni and students, some leaning forward, some blinking away surprise, others nodding slowly. As I reached the back of the auditorium, the alumni board chair stepped onto the stage, clearing his throat. He adjusted his glasses, glanced toward me, then spoke into the mic. "It's time we corrected a mistake. General Cole, your name belongs on our wall." When the call came from the White House, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, but ready. The early morning hum of the Pentagon was always the same. Hallways, 2 wide lights, 2 white footsteps swallowed in a rhythm of purpose. My office sat tucked behind layers of clearance, but that morning it felt strangely exposed, like the silence knew. Colonel Ellison entered without knocking, a rare gesture of respect. He carried a sealed folder, blue and gold, marked executive notification. He didn't speak at first, just placed it on my desk and stood back. I opened it slowly, The President of the United States takes great pride in awarding the Medal of Honor to Lieutenant General Rebecca Cole for acts of valor above and beyond the call of duty. The words blurred slightly. Not from emotion, at least not the kind people expected. I wasn't crying, I wasn't smiling, I was absorbing. It's public, Ellison said. Next week. South Lawn, full ceremony. I nodded. Who else knows media's embargoed until noon? But Melissa's outside. She knows. I looked out the glass. Melissa was pacing with her phone earbuds and scanning headlines. I opened the door and she spun around. Have you seen it yet? She asked breathlessly. The articles are everywhere. The silent general, she vanished. She returned. Even the Post has a front-page spread. She pulled out her phone. Listen to this quote. She carried the burden of command without ever asking for a podium. Now the country insists she stand on one. She looked up at me, eyes bright. Rebecca, it's happening. I managed a small smile. Feels strange. Strange, like I've been underwater for years and someone just turned on the sun. Her expression softened. You earned this. Before I could respond, my secure line lit up. A presidential liaison officer came on the screen. Young Polish II rehearsed. General Cole, the president, would also like to discuss a defense advisory role for civilian-military integration oversight. You'll receive formal documentation by week's end. I blinked slowly. Thank you. He nodded. And congratulations, ma'am. On behalf of the nation. After he disconnected, I stepped outside. Not into the crowd. Just down the side path behind a building where the night sky lingered a little longer in the shade. I walked without direction, hands in pockets, boots silent on gravel. No cameras, no salutes, no one calling my name. Just breath and air and memory. Near a low bench, I stopped, sat, looked up. So this is what being seen feels like, I whispered. Strange. The wind rustled nearby trees. Somewhere, a distant car door slammed. When I returned to my quarters, the lights were still off. A small envelope sat on the floor, slipped neatly under the doorframe. No stamp, just a name in elegant ink. Return address, Chloe Cole. I opened Chloe's letter expecting damage control. Instead, I found a memory. The envelope had no embellishment, no logo, just my name written in her steady looping cursive. Inside was a single card with faint watercolor borders and 4 words in the center. Can we talk? See below that a place and time. Sunday. 10:30 a.m. Maison Brûlée, downtown Seattle. No flourish, no manipulation. Just an ask. That morning the cafe was quiet, its windows fogged from the cold, the hum of the espresso machine the only background music. I arrived early, ordered black coffee, and sat in the corner booth by the window. Civilian clothes, no uniform, no rank. Chloe arrived 10 minutes late alone. She wore no makeup, her hair tied back in a loose braid. Her eyes were rimmed with fatigue, but not from sleep deprivation. This was emotional erosion, the look of someone who had stopped pretending to win. She sat across from me, didn't ask if she could, just did. For a long moment we said nothing. The clink of ceramic cups and distant murmurs of baristas filled the space between us. Then she slid a small velvet box across the table. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photo aged at the corners, slightly faded. 2 girls, maybe 8 and 11, dressed in matching Halloween camouflage costumes, both saluting, one grinning wide, the other smaller one staring dead serious at the camera. You kept this? I asked softly. I almost threw it out 6 times, she replied, but I couldn't. I looked at her. She wasn't performing. She wasn't building a narrative. I spent 20 years trying to outrun your shadow, she said, voice low. Turns out I built that shadow myself. I didn't respond. I just let her talk. I thought if I was louder, more visible, I could catch up, she said. But no matter what I did, there was always you. Quiet, constant. And I hated how much I resented it. I hated how much I admired it. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her cup. She didn't lift it, just held it. I didn't want you to disappear, she whispered. I just didn't know how to exist next to you. For the first time in 2 decades, I saw the sister I'd grown up with. Not the polished prosecutor, not the media strategist. Just Chloe. the girl who used to crawl into my bunk during thunderstorms and whisper, "Don't leave first." I reached across the table and laid my hand gently on hers. Her breath caught. "Then maybe now," I said quietly. We stopped running. It wasn't about medals. It was never about medals. But standing on that stage, I finally let myself feel proud. The air on the south lawn held a kind of stillness that felt rehearsed, ceremonial, and unbreakable. A white canopy stretched across the center of the space, flanked by rows of seats in tight military symmetry. Uniforms gleamed, flags fluttered. The orchestra played softly in the background, subdued, reverent. I stood at attention, my service blues immaculate, every ribbon and bar aligned with years of silence. My gloves were crisp white, my spine a line of steel. Beyond the platform, hundreds of eyes watched. Cadets, generals, senators, families. And somewhere in the third row, Chloe sat beside Melissa, hands clasped, face unreadable. She clapped with the others. No fanfare, just presence. The president, a man with an unshakable calm, approached the podium. Today he began, we honor not just a soldier, but a sentinel, a woman who walked through 20 years of conflict diplomacy and secrecy, not seeking fame, but protecting others from its cost. He paused, scanning the crowd. Lieutenant General Rebecca Cole chose silence. But it is time we speak her name aloud. It is time we say thank you. The audience stood. Applause rang through the lawn, not thunderous, but steady, grounded, earnest. He turned, took the blue ribbon from the box. With slow, practiced care, he placed it around my neck. The gold star gleamed in the spring sunlight. For the first time in a long while, I allowed my chest to rise fully. Somewhere in the crowd, a child clapped louder than the rest. A veteran near the back removed his cap and held it to his chest. As I turned to descend the steps, a young cadet in dress grays stood rigidly at the foot of the stairs. She couldn't have been more than 19. Her chin lifted slightly. "Thank you, ma'am," she said, saluting. I returned the gesture with a nod, saying nothing. I reached the podium again, this time for words. "I used to believe silence was strength," I said quietly. "That to serve meant to disappear. But I've learned something else." I paused. "We don't serve for applause, but sometimes it's good to know we were never truly invisible." The applause came again, softer this time, reflective. I turned back to the president, offering my hand. He shook it firmly, then leaned in, voice low, but firm enough to carry only to me. "You're not done yet, General." They offered me a desk in the West Wing. I chose a classroom in Fort Liberty. The lecture hall wasn't grand, just beige walls, scuffed floors, and the faint hum of aging ventilation, but to me, it was perfect. 30 cadets sat at attention, notebooks open, eyes alert. The nameplate on the podium read, Lieutenant General R. Cole Rhett. But the title mattered less now. I was there to teach, not to impress. Today's seminar, Ethical Leadership in Asymmetric Environments. We talk through real-world dilemmas, how to lead when no one's watching, how to act when the rules blur. One cadet, sharp freckles, maybe 20, asked, "Ma'am, what do you do when the system works against you?" I met her gaze. "You lead anyway," I said. "And you document everything." They laughed softly, but they understood. These young women weren't here to play dress-up. They were preparing for the reality of pressure, failure, and quiet victories. I saw myself in all of them and hoped they'd have easier paths, but no less courage. Midway through the afternoon, a knock at the back. Chloe. No makeup again. She wore jeans, a navy blazer, and held a small camera bag. She gave a sheepish wave as I approached. "Hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "You're on campus?" I asked. "I'm working with a team on a docu-series, Women in Command. Thought I'd start where I should have started years ago." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a long way from podcast snark." She shrugged. "People change." Before I could reply, Melissa appeared behind her. She grinned, holding up a book mock-up, leading in silence lessons from the field. "Publishers interested," she said. "They want co-authors." "You in?" I looked between the two of them. My sister and my old classmate, both reshaped by truths neither of us had planned to face. I nodded once. "Let's write it right." Back in the classroom, the cadets had gathered near the front. One held a large poster board drawn in colored markers. Figures in uniform medals, and in the center my face half-shaded, half-lit. At the top, in looping cursive, Our General. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I said, voice thick. Then, clearing my throat, I addressed the class. "Command isn't about shouting, it's about showing up when it's hardest to." They nodded, scribbled, sat a little straighter. As the session ended, I returned to my desk. A single red light blinked on the encrypted tablet in my briefcase. I opened it. Subject: Ghost Viper needs eyes. Request urgent cyber task force. High-level threat. Clearance code black. I stared at the message, heart still but ready. I didn't disappear. I was simply doing my job, where you couldn't see me. The hallway smelled like freshly varnished wood and printer ink, new but familiar. The banners were maroon, the same color they'd always been, and the seal of the school shimmered in gold on the wall near the entrance. The Hall of Legacy was modest, quiet. Just a stretch of corridor with nameplates carved in bronze and frame photographs beside them. I stood near the back, hands clasped behind my uniformed back. This time, there was no stage, no ceremony. Just a cluster of students in pressed blazers, a few faculty members in formal wear, and alumni lining the walls with quiet reverence. Chloe stood beside the podium, a single sheet of paper in her hands. She glanced up at me, once met my eyes, and then began. She served without needing to be seen. Chloe read, voice steady, but now we choose to see her. Not for the rank, not for the medals, but because of what she stood for when no one was watching. A pause. "She's my sister. And more importantly, she's someone I've come to learn from." She stepped down. I nodded slightly, not sure what else to do. Melissa was there too, in a navy dress and flats, her hands holding a well-worn copy of our book manuscript. She'd flown in the night before, promising to keep things simple and boring, and I had believed her until she surprised me with a quote from our book, now printed in the event program. "Leadership doesn't echo in applause, it echoes in choices." The crowd shifted as the cover on the plaque was lifted. My name, my class year. The simple phrase beneath it, Rebecca Cole, integrity and silence. No titles, no decorations, just that. Faculty gave a short speech, something about conviction, about how real power comes not from being loud, but from being lasting. I barely heard it. My eyes had drifted to the corner where 5 cadets stood in uniform, arms at their sides, proud and still. Melissa came up beside me as the crowd began to murmur again, snapping photos. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. I took a breath. Not deep. Just enough. "It's not about being remembered," I said. "It's about making sure the right things are." She smiled and rested a hand on my shoulder. From behind us, a voice whispered, "She's the reason I applied." I turned slightly. One of the cadets, no older than 19, was nudging her classmate. Her eyes were wide, her face earnest. I didn't say anything. Instead, I stepped back from the plaque, let them take the photos they wanted. Let them speak the words I'd once been denied. Then I walked out, the sound of my footsteps absorbed by the polished floor. No music, no cameras clicking, just silence and meaning. And after years of silence, erasure, and quiet dignity, Rebecca's name was finally etched not just in bronze, but in memory. The woman they once mocked as invisible now stood as a symbol of integrity in an age of noise and vanity. Her story reminded us that justice, though delayed, can still strike like thunder, clear, earned, and undeniable. When injustice is met with quiet strength, truth becomes louder than any lie ever told. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to disappear to light the path for a generation, like if Rebecca's journey moved you. Comment 1 if you felt the injustice and redemption. Comment 2 if you'd have written it differently. We're listening. Subscribe and share if you believe truth always finds its voice.